G'day everyone, Viv here. I hope you're all keeping well. Welcome back. It's been a long time since I've been talking about making painting tutorials. It's something that people ask us for all the time. I've started some and I haven't finished any of them. I do have some that I still need to edit, but that's been one of the biggest challenges is, how do I go about filming these? Do I, as I've done for many years, film and just talk as I'm filming? There's always some sort of issue, background noise, either from our neighbours, cutting up metal, or from our machines running, or some sort of issue. But I think maybe I can do this sort of format where I can record all the parts, all the processes, all the steps, and then come back and try and do in one take. Maybe I'll figure out how I might be able to split it up so I don't make too many mistakes or mumble over my words. An audio track, a voiceover. So let's not mess around too much. Let's jump into it. So this is the model that we'll be painting. This is an unreleased model from a new range called Ruins of Elaria. That range will come with ruined and intact versions of many of the models, but I don't want to go into that too much. I've decided to use this model because it's a blank canvas. It doesn't have any of the brickwork that the final models will have. So the first step is to put some texture on there so that we've got something to dry brush later on. And we're using this Granite Effect spray from Dulux. From their Duramax range, and you can get this from Bunnings. It costs about $18 a can, and I'm just bursting it on there. We're not undercoating the model with this stuff, just very gently applying some texture to the model. I'm using Fiddly Bits here, this flat black from Fiddly Bits. It's not the best paint, but I have noticed that when you apply it over this Granite Effect, it doesn't soak into the MDF as much. Now, we don't normally use it because it does soak into the MDF. Other brands of paint really don't do that, but if you're applying this over that Granite Effect, maybe that Granite Effect has some other sort of polymer or oil or something in it that coats the MDF a little bit better. I don't know. So this is the same process we use for all our models. It doesn't matter what color it's going to end up being, is just to give the whole thing a coat of flat black paint. It does help later on down the track just to hide any of those issues that we might have with paint that we can't get into a certain area. I don't wait for the model to dry. I go straight into applying this grey primer. This is from Fiddly Bits as well, and this is actually a really good paint when applied over a black undercoat. By itself, it's very soft, the colour, but when applied over a black base coat, it's really nice. It comes out really nice. It's a really nice paint. We enjoy using it. And I'm applying this at about a 45, kind of giving the model a zenithal highlight. It just adds a little bit of variation to the colour. And we'll see that here as I'm applying this human flesh colour from Army Painter. It's not something I'd normally use on a model, but it was there at hand. I want this model to be sort of a creamish colour at the end. And following my fairly standard process of just experimenting with everything that I do, I thought, let's give this a go. Now I'm just dusting this on there. I'm not giving the whole model a heavy undercoat. I've got those two colours underneath me, the black and the grey, to give me a little bit of tonal variation to this colour that I'm applying. And you can see once I assemble the model, you can see it's shaded. There's variation there in the colour, and that's going to work for me as I get towards my dry brushing stages. It's naturally going to highlight the model. You can see in the last step there, I fully assemble the model and then quickly spray over it again just to tie all the colours together. I sprayed the roofs a cherry red or an Indian red because it was around. It is a gloss colour, not normally something that I'd use, but again, it was right there. I just want to get this model painted. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time messing about with it. So I grabbed whatever colour was close to me and thought, yeah, let's rock with that. It does cause some issues for me later on because we don't have any other red paint in the studio, so highlighting that roof becomes an issue, and we'll see that later on. To finish off the roof, I need to mask off all of this trim. I don't want to have to worry about coming back with brushes and stuff and picking out that detail. So I mask it off with a little bit of low-tack masking tape and then go ahead and spray my roof red. It is worthwhile noting that this piece needs to be fully dry before you put any masking tape on it. Otherwise, you're just going to peel the paint off underneath it. Wait for that to completely dry, and then you can go ahead and remove your masking. This process can be avoided in some cases where you might paint the model in parts before you assemble it, but where you have assembled a model and you need to paint something and you don't want to have to worry about getting in too much with brushes and stuff like that, see what you can do with some masking. In this case, the masking job was very easy, so it made sense for me to do that here. And the effect has worked out really nicely. So now I'm experimenting again. I found some white paint. This is just very cheap white paint from the craft store, I'm pretty sure. And this light tannish, light brown color is probably some sort of color from the paint aisle at your hardware store. You know how you go down there and they've got all those color swatches and you can choose from hundreds of different colors? We get just little sample pots of those, and you know, that's what we paint all our terrain with. And I'm just mixing those together to end up with a sort of a creamish color that I like. And then I go ahead and dry brush the whole model. You know, I've got 3 colors now underneath me. I've got that black, that gray, and you know, that human flesh from Army Painter. So my dry brushing here is just, designed to, highlight for me basically. I find a bit of scrap MDF to help mask off the roof, so as I'm dry brushing I don't end up with any of this cream color on that red roof that I painted, which kind of is pointless because later on I end up putting a bunch of sort of tannish colors on the roof, because I don't have that red color to highlight with. So I go through and I separate the model out. I do the roof first, then I do the second floor, then I do the third floor. And once I've done that, I'll put the whole model back together and come back and dry brush it again to try and join or tie together the different levels. So I'm just concentrating here on, just going through to doing a simple dry brush. I take some paint onto my brush. I'm using quite a coarse brush here. I'm pretty sure this is a pig head brush. I don't like to use, synthetic sort of plastic or nylon bristles. They just don't work very well for a dry brush. I prefer some sort of fiber, and I'm pretty sure that this is a pig hair brush. But you want it to be stiff, and it's a round brush, which we've found works best for most of the dry brushing applications that we need. And I just keep going back and forward, loading up my brush. I brush it off. I am normally very careful when I've loaded up my brush again. I go very gently on the model just to see what's coming off. And then, as I'm happy with, the amount of paint that's on my brush, I start to get a little bit heavier. And the more and more paint that comes off, the heavier I get. The more forceful I get with that brush, really just jabbing it onto the model and forcefully pushing it around. In this way, I found that I get a really nice, variation in the color that I'm applying. And you get these different sorts of gradients, these different sorts of tonal values from the same color paint, without having to come back and do multiple layers of dry brushing of different sorts of colors. Obviously, if you want strong contrast, then you do need to use different colors. But for this purpose here, all I'm doing is applying this first dry brush layer, and then we'll come back in and we'll mix more white into this and do our final highlight. It's worthwhile mentioning during this entire process, I never wash the brush. It is the same brush throughout the whole process. I do come back several times and have to mix up more of this paint. Again, I've mixed that light brown and that white paint together. So to make sure that my model is tied together, sometimes I need to mix up more paint. It's not as difficult as it sounds. You can see just there on the left-hand side of the screen, my dry brush paper where I'm taking off the excess paint. Paint dries very, very quickly on there. So when I need to mix up a new batch, I just dry brush on another section of that paper towel, and then I can have a look, are the colors the same? Do I need more white? Do I need to make it brighter? Do I need to bring the color back? Do I need some more of that brown color or my base color? And then you can match those up on that dried piece of, waste paper basically, and then keep dry brushing. The bottom floor here for me was the biggest, time sink, trying to get in all of those pillars, trying to get underneath the verandas and dry brush the wool on the inside. You can see I'm mixing up more paint here. I take some of my base color, some white, I dry brush it out on the paper and I'm checking it. Is it the same? It's close. Yeah, okay, great. Let's roll with that. So the bottom layer here is, takes up the most amount of time. And, I keep coming back and going, oh, I forgot that wall, or I didn't do the inside of those pillars. And, this is where I spent the majority of the time. I do fix up that little break in the model a little bit later on. Here we go. I assemble the model and put it all back together, and I'm looking for, drastic changes in the dry brushing. And then try to dry brush the model as a whole to bring the color back together. And you'll see here on the back wall when we spin around in just a minute, there's a fairly significant difference. I don't know how much of it comes up on camera, but in person, that second floor is significantly brighter than the bottom floor. So you'll see me spending quite a lot of time here on that middle section, the big flat panel in the middle, the pillars, trying to add a bit more brightness. You can see I'm taking some more white paint, adding a bit more brightness to that bottom layer. If I didn't do this step, I'd end up with a model that was, had very clearly different, colors on the bottom and the top because I dry brushed them, separately, in separate floors. So once the model is completely back together, I go through and I'm looking for variations and trying to tie it all together. Here I've mixed more white into my mixture, and I just keep on taking more and more white. At one point I do need to come back and mix up more of this brighter color, and I'm just trying to catch the top edges, the top of the lip, the top of the window frames. As you can see, that the top of the roof, top of the arches, top of the pillars. You know, I'm just trying to hit all of that stuff with this almost white. It's probably a very, very light colored cream. Just to give, you know, my final highlight. I think the effect has worked really, really well. I think I mentioned before that I spent about an hour and a half painting this model from beginning to end. Obviously I had some period of time in there while I'm waiting for things to dry. You know, you'll see later on, you know, towards the end when I paint the door, I'm using a hairdryer at one point just to, you know, speed the process up. I don't want this to take forever. You know, I don't like spending huge amounts of time painting terrain and my models. You know, I just want them to be done. And so using some of these techniques, you know, things get done fairly quickly. So here begins the roofing conundrum. There was no other red in the studio, so I found some orange and a medium sort of brown color, and I thought, let me mix these two things together and see what I get. I'm totally experimenting here. It doesn't really work in hindsight. There was some purple sitting in the studio. I probably should have grabbed some purple and tried that. But here we go. I spent a lot of time here fooling around with this color. I've gone and got some black paint, and now I'm mixing some black into it. I'm just totally ad-libbing some sort of color for the roof. In the end, it does kind of work. I do a dry brush here on these roof panels that cover up the archways, those corridors or whatever they are. I do diagonals, come back and do the opposite diagonal. Now I'm dry brushing straight down. At this point, I'm ad-libbing so much that I'm just experimenting. I am happy with the result. It kind of looks like we ended up with some of that whitewash or that paint or whatever from the story above us, slowly over time running down onto the roof. We're adding, I guess, in some ways, a bit of a weathering effect on this model without actually having to come back and do any sort of weathering on it at all. I'm very happy with the effect, so I go ahead and do both roofs. And then once I've done that, I lay them both down on the table so I can compare them against each other to make sure that both sides of my archways are the same. And then I do the same thing on top of the peaked roof. And at the end of the day, the effect looks okay. I'm happy with it. If I had, some red, I would have used that, but just to help, make that red roof really pop. Using this technique has really, knocked back a lot of that red, but at the end of the day, I'm very happy with it. I always learn things when I'm experimenting, and I had great fun. It was an enjoyable model to paint. The last thing that I need to do here is paint the door. Now, on some of our newer kits and the type of door that we've used on this range, very, very easy to put in after you've painted the model. So you see that I struggle a little bit here to try and paint the door while it's installed in the model, but I managed to do it, and it's come up okay. I'm very happy with that roof. It looks great. Now it's just a matter of tackling the door now. I totally zoomed in and forgot that I'd zoomed in here to try and capture me painting the door. So most of this sequence here is kind of a bit rubbish. You really can't see what I'm doing. But I've taken a flat, soft, bristled brush, and I'm applying some of that orange paint directly to the outside of the door. I haven't worried at all about painting the inside of this model at all. Obviously that's up to you, if you want to do that. But obviously by undercoating it and putting in that zenithal grey and then my initial base colour, I did give the inside of the model some colour, but I'm not going to go through and detail it. I apply some orange to the door, and you can see I'm using a hairdryer just to speed up this process. Like I mentioned before, I don't want this to take forever. I just want it to be quick, simple, and effective. And once we put this on the table, it's going to look great. So I'm just trying to blend in the orange. I've got lots of other paint on that palette, and I keep on picking it up. There we go. For an hour and a half, it's looking really, really good. There's obviously loads more that you could do with this model, but for all intents and purposes, it's completely usable in a game, and it gives us a wonderful base to do any further work to it that we might want to do. Looks great. Aside from that red roof, maybe for the next red roof I might try and find some red paint. There we go. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this format has worked out okay. Hopefully this time we've remembered to record the sound, and if it works out well, then we'll come back and do lots more of these. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you soon. See ya.